Hi there. Hi, I'm Lisa Lamy with Lisa Lamy Art, and today we're going to talk all about creativity. And I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Robin Reynolds. Robin and I met each other during one of the courses I took over the last 2 years, and it was Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy. So not only was the course great, I got to meet some really interesting and talented women, such as Robin, in the course. So I'm anxious to introduce you to her. But before we begin, I want to let you know a little bit about who I am. My name is Lisa Lamy. I have a company called Lisa Lamy Art, and that's where I encourage other women to get in touch with their creative side because I know it will give them peace and joy. And no one knows that more about that peace and joy. And her goal is very much the same as mine. It's Robin Reynolds. I want her to introduce herself. She's got a really interesting background, has done so many great things, and I'm delighted to have her with us today. So I'll turn it over to you, Robin.
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And just by way of introduction, thank you for all of your kind words. I am currently working as a systems engineer, and I also have a small business called Ink and Alchemy, which is focused on helping women design their lives intentionally. And the main vehicle or channel that I use to accomplish that is a regular creative practice. So I think maybe for some context, Lisa, I know that systems engineering and let's say creativity sort of seem like opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'd like to explain kind of how I got here. Neither of those things naturally were my default. I grew up in a place where people that I knew didn't really have college degrees, and I did a variety of jobs like waitress. I was actually a clown at one point, and I was a roofer. So none of these jobs were educated. They didn't make a lot of money, and I didn't love any of them. I had a sort of a rock bottom experience. That's a real place in the world. And it caused me to move. I just packed up and moved from Ohio to Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I'm at now. And through that process, I realized that I had been just letting life sort of take me where it would. I wasn't intentionally exerting control over my present or my future. I just don't think I understood that skill set. And so when I came to Albuquerque, I started college at 34. I had two kids. They were young teenagers. And I got an undergrad in chemistry, which was completely wackadoodle, nothing that I thought I would ever be able to do.
Yeah.
That led me to some other things. And I have a degree in nanoscience and microsystems engineering. And I work as a systems engineer. So systems engineering is really an engineering discipline. It's kind of a cross-disciplinary discipline that works usually in a technical field to realize some product. So an automobile, something like that. It's a very specific process that one goes through. Understanding the context, understanding all of the details around whatever you're producing, the whole system, and then what are the requirements that you absolutely need to meet? How can you test to those requirements? How can you verify and validate? So the reason I bring that up is we don't see those principles applied in our personal lives or in other softer areas.
Mhm.
So part of what I'm doing is really abstracting that a little bit, thinking through those principles because I think they're critical, and understanding how we as people can engineer our lives in a similar fashion. It's a little bit of a softer process. It's not quite as technical and sharp, but I think the juxtaposition or the combination of those two things, setting a firm foundation, understanding what your principles and core non-negotiables are, your requirements, understanding what your deepest dreams and desires are, is the first step to actually getting there. And I think often we sort of don't take that step in our personal lives because we're not taught to or don't think to. So that's kind of an intro into what I'm doing and how systems engineering and some of my technical experience is even related to all of that. Long-winded, but there you go.
So do you think there's a lot of people like I know the course that you're teaching called A Call to Create. Um, is that a great opportunity for people to, discover that part of them that maybe they've been denying or don't even know exists? But you through that program, it sounds like you teach like it's like a step-by-step process for that discovery. Do you think that's really needed? Uh, and I can tell you my unbiased answer is yes, it's needed in the world because we
Mhm.
all have that creativity that often doesn't get nurtured. I know that was the case for me. Uh, Tell me, like, just some of this experiences you've had working with students, not just in the like you've done in class, and then
Mhm.
of course with the pandemic, it opened up the opportunity to do obviously online learning as well. What are some of the aha moments for people that have taken that program?
So I have been teaching in the creative side since about 2011, and that was mostly in person with a couple of exceptions. I did some online work, but you're right. When the pandemic came, I really turned my attention from that in-person work, and like you said, we were together in that course, and I really worked on creating my online workshop.
Yeah,
So it's been so interesting because I've learned things that I didn't expect. And one of them is this. I already knew that the world sort of doesn't honor or value creative work much. Especially having a technical job, I can see that if you do something technical, there are a lot of hoorahs and yay and wow, you're fabulous. In
yeah,
fact, I don't love it as much as I love the creative work. I also don't think it's as impactful for me in the world as the creative work. So I see that imbalance all the time, that the world values things with more clear deliverables,
yeah,
but the creative work itself changes people internally. That's enormous. And so what I've seen through my course is all kinds of people, whether they appear to be very successful on the outside, or maybe you can sort of detect that they're struggling a little in their lives, they all benefit from this creative practice that I'm talking about. And
yeah,
it's more than just like making art, even though it is that. It's 8 weeks long. Every week we have a project that we work on, but it's less about what the product looks like at the end and more about who you're becoming and what you're thinking as you're doing it. And it's really just a safe space for people to lean into that with no expectations about what it looks like, what they're achieving. No defense needed about the time you spend on this creativity, because we don't do that enough. And so I see people with, multiple degrees that come in and are really just overcome by the fact that they finally are starting to hear what's in their innermost thoughts. It's
yeah,
it's their inner voice that the world and we tamp down for years and years because we're told that it doesn't matter. I think especially as women, but I think all people, men and women, experience this, that we hide big parts of ourselves to the point where we forget who we really are. And I think that's the big transformation I had.
yeah,
What the thing that I described at the beginning, that was not a short transformation. That was, minimum 12 years. I'm still working on it.
yeah,
But I'm trying to do with the course is look back and in retrospect and say, what did I do by chance, circumstance, learning and getting more insight? What did I do? And how can I offer that to someone in a more succinct, targeted way so I can shorten their timeline on some of that discovery?
yeah. So, is there opportunity for discussion? Because I'm sure you create a safe space. Because I know for me, art was always what I turned to. It seemed like automatically when I was going through rough patches, and I've often given the example of when my father was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Mm,
It was just so much to take in. this man that you know, always pictured as the strong stoic type was now needing your care. Suddenly roles were reversed. I had to be the caregiver, right? But art really got me through. Like, have there been those kind of breakthroughs with some of your students where they've shared that that was finally a release? There was something that they've been dealing with in their lives that the art was that sort of a form of release?
Absolutely, 100%. I won't go into specifics just
Yeah.
because,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
sure. Yeah.
anonymity. But yeah, so the course is pre-recorded. There are resources, a lot of materials and videos, but we meet once a week electronically, but in real time like this.
Yeah.
And those calls turned out to be more about having those hard conversations. Women are journaling, visual journaling, and written journals, and they're writing things based on the prompts and the assignments throughout the week. And they have read some of the most incredible, vulnerable, beautiful things that I've ever seen. And each time that happens, I feel super honored to even be facilitating this or a part of this.
Yeah.
And so, but it's also confirmed for me that I'm not crazy or off on some wild goose chase here. It worked for me. It
Yeah.
probably won't work for everyone, but it works for most people if you can get yourself in the right emotional space to accept it and to actually show up for yourself in that way. It's pretty hard because we're conditioned not to do it that way, that deeply.
So, like, I'm just curious, like, with people around you, they know this is your passion. This is, you know, the direction you want to take your life through this work. Are there still people in your circle? Because I know I get that they kind of think that, you know, like you said, we off the top we were talking about how people don't give it the credit that it's due, or you
Mhm.
don't get the accolades that you would have gotten if you had done, you know, with the work you've done, like in your other role as a systems engineer. It just
Mhm.
seems to be different. Like, what is it? Like, it really frustrates me. What is it about people not taking art more, and I don't want to say more seriously, because it should be play, it should be creative, but to me, it serves such a greater purpose, and it just seems to escape people. Like, I'm just wondering if you've had similar experiences with those kind of reactions to what you do.
I have. I've actually had both end members. And so I'll mention them both because I think that's a balanced perspective.
Yeah.
I think definitely, what is that? What's going on? I think part of it is we really just live in this production based world. And that's definitely the professional world that I live in.
Yeah.
We have timelines, we have deliverables, we're checking all the data and we're analyzing it, and we want to know how close we're coming.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense for certain types of products. It totally makes sense from a manufacturing and production perspective. But the problem, in my opinion, is that whole paradigm has seeped into our very culture and all of our lives. Um, this is a little bit of an offshoot, but I think you'll understand it. Even this online presence that everyone has now, you and I included, the fact that there are these hard expectations thrust upon us. We should post this often. We should do this kind of post. Um, I struggle with that because that's a little bit production based. That's really telling me I can't meet the mark and I'm not good enough if I don't do those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and in fact, Lisa, there are all these videos, and I get so much from online, by the way, so much. I have met people that I never would have met that are truly friends and support systems in my life. I love the online community, but I think the flip side of it is there are these expectations, how we raise our families, what our career ought to be, what our hair ought to be like, how old is a pretty woman and what is too old. And so these are some of the questions we've actually talked through and that are part of my curriculum, because I think for me, as I grow older, it's important for me to disconnect from some of those expectations and really understand what are the expectations I have for myself to consider my life happy and satisfying. And um, I know what they are now. And so the flip side of this is, people don't always value this creativity, but I've actually had very few people tell me that. And I struggled putting a lot of my work online at first because it meant throwing it out there to the world. The professional organizations that I've been a part of and people that I know at work. And it felt almost like a secret identity that I had. Once I got past that barrier and I just kind of gritted my teeth and closed my eyes and said, this is what I want to do. It's been years now. And really, I have not often had someone come up to me and say, this is crazy. What are you doing? I think the people that don't understand it, and there are a lot of them, I think they just kind of smile and nod and move on with their lives. And I think the reason they don't understand it is they're so disconnected from that or themselves. It's just nothing they can comprehend. And that's okay because we're all in different places in our journey, right? So I just don't worry about it too much.
You can't convert everyone. I mean,
No.
you have your following and people that will resonate with, and you have to just come to terms that yes, not everyone will understand. I think we've come through very similar experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Now your art though, like it doesn't, like you are into poetry, you're into collage, you're into a lot of things. And it seems like that is the lot of the artists. I don't think I've met an artist yet who everybody talks about niching down, like, focus on one thing. I'm one of those people that likes to do watercolor. I like oil painting. I like drawing. And obviously you're very similar in nature, that your interests span like all the arts as well.
That's true. Yeah. I'm definitely a generalist. And really, I think more than anything, what I've found is that I love learning. I love to be curious and I love to be engaged in the world. And so to me, whatever my creative practice is just echoes that. I do tend to do, like you said, a lot of creative writing, a lot of poetry, and a lot of visual journaling. But it's changed over the years, the way that I write, the way the journaling looks. And I expect that in 5 years, it will be completely different again. If it doesn't, that means I'm probably not engaging in those principles I just told you. I'm probably not transforming and learning and growing and really curiously looking at the world. Because when I do that, there are these small shifts that happen over time. And I like that. I really like change and transformation. And I know, by the way, that a lot of people don't. It's terrifying. And that's a huge part of the workshop that I teach. It's really the question of how do you react to change?
Yeah.
And not everyone needs to fully lean into it full bore, but I think some level of acceptance and even joy and change can really affect our experiences in life because life is going to throw you change all the time. And if you're, stomping your feet and throwing a fit every time it happens, I think you're experiencing less joy than just understanding that's coming your way and moving through it a little more gracefully.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I struggle with as an entrepreneur, or as I call it, entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
is my whole business was founded on, encouraging, women to find their creative side and all that. But then at some point, business, like just building your business, starts to overtake your own creativity. Do you find that a struggle with yourself or your students, that one of the big things is I'm too busy, I don't have time for an art practice? And how do you guide them to do that? I know I have to, for me, set things up. Like literally, I have my dining room table right now has watercolor sitting on it.
Mm-hmm.
All, my water jars and the brushes are all there so that I'm reminded every time I go downstairs, it's like staring me in the face that it's time for you to create. Do you find that yourself, that sometimes it's a struggle in all the busyness, or for your students as well? And how do you help them overcome that?
Yeah, I do actually. And so I think I'm deeply entrenched in my creative practice now. So
Yeah.
what happens for me after these years of working it into my life and understanding the value of it and evolving it is if I don't do something creative every day, I can feel that. It's kind of like someone who does yoga every day and they feel really stiff if they don't do it for a day or two. That's me. And so luckily for me, because I've put enough time in and I've created this habit and this regular practice, I have a lot of ways that I fit creativity into my life. And I'll tell you about those. These are the tips that I share with my students because being too busy for creativity is one of the biggest objections and pieces of feedback that I get. Like, sounds great. That's lovely. I have 2 kids. I got to get them to school. I also have a full-time job and somebody needs to cook dinner.
Yeah.
We all have those things, different in different phases of our lives, but we all have things that we're doing. And so I think one of the first keys is to really understand and prioritize it. That's kind of part of the first work that we do in the course is to
Mhm.
understand why it's important to you so you can go back to that. But once you get past that, the practical, tactical ways are one of them is what you said. Not everyone has a dedicated studio space, but if you can create some dedicated space, even if it's just a very small table or something, that really helps because you don't have to unpack it, spend some time getting it organized, get your head into the game, make something, and then pack it all back up. I
Yeah.
think that seems like a lot of work, and people just won't bother if they only have 20 minutes.
Yeah.
One of the tips I've given people is get a big piece of cardboard from some box you get in the mail or whatever, and make that your sort of studio table. Leave your stuff on it. And when you need to pick it up, if the only place you have is the dining room table, pick it up and slide it under the bed or something for a while. But that way you're not constantly resetting things up.
Yeah.
Some of the other things that I've done in my own life is, and this is really back when I was at university still, and kind of developing a lot of these ideas. I didn't have time at all. I was working full time, I was in school full time, and I was raising 2 kids on my own. And so I would ride the bus and I would take things in my backpack. So I would make sure I took my journal, I would take different pens. It was a different kind of creativity. I wasn't necessarily, having 20 paints to work with or
Yeah.
whatever, but it was the way that I worked through a lot of the things and maybe made sketches or thought of ideas, wrote poetry. It still really scratched that itch.
Yeah.
And I think, just incorporating creativity into your whole life is really what my course is about too. It's creativity is not just painting or sculpting or something like that. It's bringing something new into the world. And the biggest, most impactful thing we can bring into the world are new thoughts, new ways of being in the world, new ideas. And so all that creative work is really just driving those things, new decisions, new choices. So I think making it permeate your life, and it takes practice because the world wants us to check out, I think.
Yeah.
The world wants us to be a little numb. You have to fight against that. And so those are a couple of them. I've got a lot of suggestions for that actually on my website, and I have a free resource there. It's called Begin to Create, and there's a whole section there on how to find time for creative activities if you're struggling with that.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Just based on what you're talking about, I think you're going to appeal to so many people because I think there are so many people that have found the last few years so difficult on so many levels, and that they've known that they've needed something, and they're not going to medicate themselves through it, and they've turned to art. Like I said, art helped me when I was still working in my corporate job. I actually had time in the morning, which was incredible. Like I wasn't getting on a bus and enduring that 1 hour commute every day. So I had time in the morning to take courses, art courses, or God forbid, draw. Um,
Mhm.
so little wonder last November, I made that decision that I did not want to go back to living that lifestyle any longer. Because and then you feel guilty for saying that out of the pandemic, some good came because we know that a lot of people have suffered. But I tell you, it was an awakening for me and
Yeah.
an opportunity to go back to my true self, and that involved art, which was denied for so many years. So I just think what you're offering is going to be so helpful and so literally therapeutic to people. Um, I'm sure you would agree. And you have a passion that comes through.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
and yeah,
let me let me interject, Lisa, and just say I've been so impressed since I met you, and then when you did have the courage, it really is courage, to walk away from that corporate job because in many ways they're a trap, but at the same time, we get a lot from them. That's how we pay our bills.
yeah,
We have health insurance, all of that. So I really admire that strength that you have. And I agree with you. I think art is definitely therapeutic. I think that it's okay to acknowledge that some good things came from the pandemic, to counter all the horrible things that happened. And I do think that a lot of people, well, two things happened. People got a lot of clarity in their lives. They started to prioritize a little differently,
yeah,
myself included. And
yeah.
then also um, some systemic problems in people's lives and in our society and our medical system.
Mhm.
They were really exposed for what they were. The pandemic didn't necessarily cause them; it just pulled off the curtain, and people realized, oh wow, I haven't built the right support systems in my life,
Yeah.
perhaps, or I haven't taken good care of myself health wise. And so I, I really value those insights, I think, and wouldn't have wanted the pandemic to happen to bring them about, but I'm glad that we got some good out of it, and I'm glad you did too.
Yeah.
I love that you're working on your art now.
Oh,
Very inspiring.
thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
I just think the course you have is really going to change some lives, like really bring so much joy, as I talked about earlier, that joy and peace into their lives that is so missing at times. So
I hope so.
I think before we close, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about the course, like how people could enroll in that course, the
Mhm.
floor is yours. I've left our your web address up there as well, but any parting words?
Great. Thank you so much. I think we've talked a lot about the course, and I think I'm really proud of what I've created, and I was grateful for the students that went through. I offered them opportunities for feedback the whole time, and I really just viewed myself more of a facilitator than anything else. And so this next time around, I've been able to make some tweaks and some improvements, and I think it's just going to get better. I think one of the really incredible things about it is that there's a community there. It's not just, go through these lessons, accomplish this thing, but we're really building relationships with ourselves and with others. So that has been incredible. I would love to answer any questions about the course. If anyone has them, they're welcome to head to my website, drop me an email, whatever. And yeah, the course opens later in September in just a few weeks. So if you follow me on my website or on Instagram or anything like that, you'll see those notifications. And I would love to have any of your listeners there.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you for
awesome.
having me, Lisa.
You're very welcome, and all the best. As I said, it's going to be a great experience for them. You did it the first time; it's going to even be better the next time around. So, I just encourage people to be a part of that program. So that's all the time I have for this YouTube, and I want to thank Robin again for taking the time to be with us. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.